Okay, so imagine for a second the most private, off-the-record conversations happening inside the White House. Now, what if those conversations weren't just whispered, but recorded? Well, today, that's exactly what we're digging into. A political firestorm that was kicked off by a series of secret tapes.
It really comes down to this one question, right? What happens when a top advisor's private, unfiltered thoughts suddenly become very, very public? It's a question that gets right to the heart of power, loyalty, and, well, the crazy media world we live in today. And it's a central mystery we're going to unpack here. So the whole thing just explodes in December of 2025. Vanity Fair drops an absolute bombshell of an article. It turns out they have 11 secretly taped interviews with the president's own chief of staff, Susie Wiles. And we're not talking about a few offhand comments here. No, these were deep, candid conversations that were recorded over an entire year. To really get a handle on why these tapes caused such a political earthquake, you first have to understand the two people right at the center of it all.
So on one side, you've got Susie Wiles. She's the president's chief of staff, co-chair of his 2024 campaign. I mean, she's a serious power player. In political circles, she's even known as the Ice Maiden for just how effective and, well, ruthless she can be. And then on the other side, you have Gabriel Sherman, a top journalist for Vanity Fair. This is a guy who's known for his deep dive investigations, especially his book on Roger Ailes that just blew the lid off Fox News. So you have this ultimate insider talking to a journalist famous for taking down powerful people. It's a perfect storm.
All right, so what was actually on these tapes that sent total shockwaves through DC? Let's get into the juicy part, the quotes that had literally everyone talking.
First up, and probably the most damaging comments, were the ones aimed directly at the president himself. This was a super rare, completely unfiltered look at his personality from someone in his absolute inner circle. Okay, so Wiles uses this really powerful, kind of wild analogy to describe the president's whole mindset. Now, she's super clear that he doesn't drink, but she compares his personality to a high-functioning alcoholic. In her view, he's someone who operates with this incredibly exaggerated sense of his own power, this belief that there's absolutely nothing he can't do. Zero. But her candid thoughts didn't just stop with the president. Nope, the tapes also revealed what she really thought about the vice president, JD Vance. Wow, with this one quote, Wiles basically throws a ton of shade on the vice president's whole political journey. She's suggesting that his big switch from being a critic to a major supporter, well, that it was more about political strategy than any real change of heart. That is a hefty-duty critique to be coming from inside the same administration. And her commentary didn't stop there. She cast a pretty wide net, giving some incredibly blunt opinions on a few other very influential people connected to the administration. For instance, she reportedly went after Pam Bondi's handling of the Epstein files release, saying she completely whiffed it. Then she kind of dismisses the public's huge interest in those files as being driven by Joe Rogan listeners, calling them new to our world. And then there's Elon Musk. She apparently really didn't hold back, calling him an odd duck and an avowed ketamine user, and said that no rational person could ever think his management style was a good idea.
But, these tapes weren't just gossip about personalities. They also gave us this rare and honestly kind of chilling look into the administration's core motivations and how it thinks about using its power.
Now, this quote right here is so important. It paints a picture of a White House that isn't just constantly thinking about revenge. No, it's something maybe even more unsettling. It's a cold, opportunistic approach. According to Wiles, when a chance to hit a political enemy comes along, they'll take it, without a second thought. So, as you can imagine, once the article dropped, the fallout was instant and it was intense. The White House had to go into full-on damage control mode and fast.
And the way they all reacted was, honestly, a masterclass in political spin. The president did this surprisingly clever move where he called Wiles fantastic, but then sort of owned her quote by agreeing he has an addictive personality. The vice president tried to laugh it off, joking on X to downplay that whole conspiracy theorist line. Meanwhile, the official line from Wiles and her team was pure outrage. They called it a hit piece and argued that the whole story was framed to be misleading, that all this important context was just thrown out the window. So all of this, the crazy quotes, the carefully planned responses, it all leads us back to the one central question at the very heart of this story. What in the world was Susie Wiles thinking? And this is where it gets really interesting, because there are basically two completely different ways to look at this whole thing. On one hand, you have the argument that this was a calculated betrayal. I mean, she knew exactly who she was talking to, and she trashed her boss and her colleagues on tape. And maybe the biggest clue, she never actually denied that the quotes were accurate. But then there's the other side, the argument that this was all just a big misrepresentation. Was this just her venting, the kind of stuff anybody says in a high-stress job that was then twisted by the journalist to create this chaotic, negative story?
Ultimately, the story of the Wiles tapes is about so much more than just one administration. It really forces all of us to think about a much bigger, much more uncomfortable question in our modern world. In an age where literally any conversation can be recorded, where any private thought can be blasted out to the public, where do we draw the line? Where does loyalty end, and where does the public's right to know what's happening behind closed doors begin? There are no easy answers here, and it's a question that is absolutely going to shape our politics and our media for years to come.